Welcome. So in this teaching video, we are going to look at some of the joys and trials associated with using secondary data analysis. The first step you're going to do is actually open the data set. So on your jump drive, just go ahead and click on the data set. This is a larger set, so it may take a couple minutes to open. While it's doing that, I'm just going to review our plan of analysis for today. The first thing we're going to do is explore the data. So this is a new set. We did not design the survey. We did not collect the data in any capacity. And so it's really important for us to spend a good deal of time getting to know the questions. How were they asked? How were the responses? Which questions have a lot of missing data associated with them? Which questions do not? Which questions are positively and negatively skewed? So you really need to put that time and work in. The second portion of what we're going to do today is filtering out the missing data or addressing the missing data. And filtering is one way we could do that. There are multiple ways, and we'll discuss a little bit of other options as well. And then the third thing we're going to do today is a very brief analysis that looks at addressing research question number 2. So in particular, I am interested in students' experiences of campus climate. And I'm very much interested in students with disabilities' experiences of the campus climate. And there's a variety of ways to conceptualize this, but I want to know basically, do students with autism spectrum disorder have different experiences on campus than other students with disabilities, and then also in comparison to students without disabilities? So that's kind of our research goal, and so we're going to take one small step towards answering question number 2 today. All right, so the first way to do this is actually, so when we open this up, we have variable view and we have data view. I prefer to work in variable view, particularly with such a large data set. So this is what the variable view, or the data view, would look like. I'm going to switch this over to variable view. I'm actually going to play a little bit with the column just so I can read stuff a little bit better. So I'm going to pull this open and say, okay, here are the labels. And I'm also quite interested in the values. So how are these responses in the system? With this particular data set, there's a lot of categorical variables. There's very few continuous. So the variable we'll be exploring today is going to be looking at students' observations of actually the experience of other people. So we are taking a look at whether or not within the past year the student has observed any conduct or communications that they thought created an exclusionary, intimidating, or offensive working or learning environment. So basically, I would summarize this question as, do you see people bullying or harassing other people on campus? So treatment of others is an important part of campus climate, as well as treatment of self. And you will actually, in our example, be looking at the treatment of self. So, all right, so that's the question. That's the survey question that we're going to look at. And when we go back to our data set, that survey question is question 57. It's located right here. We can see that there. And we're going to take a quick look at the responses. And the responses are no, yes, and not answered. Okay. So another great way to get a picture of what we're dealing with is to do a codebook report. So we'll do report, analyze, reports, codebook. I'm going to go ahead and pull this down. And then I will put within the past year. We'll move that over. I'm going to hit paste. I very much like working with syntax. I think it makes your life incredibly easier, especially if you take good notes within the syntax. So the first thing I'm going to do is highlight this and hit run. And this gives us a codebook. So I can see in this particular variable that 78%, or 29,435 people, said, nope, I have never seen another person bullied within the past year on this campus. And we can see that about 21.7%, or 8,173 people have said, yeah, I do. Then we have these 85 people down here that are missing. Okay, and so we'll just keep those in mind and we'll come back to them. Now, I'm interested in this particular variable, but I want to know if people's differences happen by disability type. And so there are a couple different disability variables in this particular data set. The one I'm interested in looking at today, and again, reports, codebook, I'm going to look at a recoded variable that I did. I'm going to send this back over. And by the way, you could run multiples at the same time. For the purpose of our teaching video, I'm not. But it is much faster and you can have multiple variables in codebook. All right, so I'm going to pull the recoded variable to say students with autism, students with disabilities that are not autism, and students without disabilities. I'm going to go ahead and paste that. And I'm going to go ahead and run it. So, in looking at this particular picture, what we're going to see is there's only 158 students with autism in this data set. There are 7,037 students with disabilities who are not autistic, and we see about 27,663, or about 73.7% of our data set have no disability. What I want to point out is we've got about 7% of our data is missing, so 2,735 people missing data. And part of that is actually, my guess is, and again I didn't collect this data, so my guess is it's in part due to the way the survey question was asked. And so I'm actually going to show you the survey question. When we look at this, which, if any of the conditions listed below impacts your learning, work, or living activities, mark all that apply. And we will talk in class and lecture a little bit more about how this type of question actually set up quite a bit of work for the particular research questions that I am interested in answering. But the very last option down here is I have none of the listed conditions. My suspicion is that a chunk of those 2,000 some odd missing data points actually didn't fully read this question. They just skimmed it and missed the last option. So I'm wondering if the survey was, conducted slightly or worded slightly differently and putting the I have none up at the top, whether or not that would have affected our missing data rate. The other thing I've noticed in that I went through this literally line by line to look at the other. And a lot of people would click actually both other and I have none. And in the others, please specify, they would list something, for example, diabetes, that may clearly impact their learning. And so it's difficult to ascertain exactly what to do with that. And there's a variety of things we can do with the missing data. For the purposes of today, what we're going to do is I'm actually just going to exclude that data from our analysis, okay? So in order to do that, I'm going to filter it out. So we'll go Data, Select Cases, and this is where it's really much easier when you do have a working knowledge of your data. So if condition is satisfied, I'll put if. So the first thing is I need to make sure that the vast majority of my missing data is actually associated with this disability variable. So I'm going to move that over. And I know, because I built this variable, that missing data is coded as 5. So anything that's less than or equal to 4 is fine. The next thing, so that's the first chunk of folks I'd like to remove. And then I'm going to hit and, because there's that other straggler 75 people that I'd like to get rid of as well. And so we're going to bring this variable over. And I know associated with our question 57, again, because I've spent quite a bit of time getting to know this data, that the missing data for this particular question happens to be coded as 0. So essentially anything that's greater than 0 will be fine. I'm going to hit continue. And I'm going to hit paste, okay? And I'm actually going to put a note in because it's very important that you document what you're doing. So I'm going to star, so that way I don't affect the syntax at all. And I'm going to write a quick note saying excluding missing data. All right, go ahead and turn my filter on, hit run. And there's a couple ways I can check this. One way is I can actually go to my data and I can see the filters right here, okay? The second thing, because I am a little bit OCD with my analysis, and because when you have syntax, it's as simple as copy paste. I'm actually going to copy these down. I'm going to paste them, and I'm just going to rerun and check to see if I have the missing data. So I'll hit run. And what I can see here is the missing is turned to 0. And the missing, again, is turned to 0. So, should be all set. The next step, I'm just going to remove some of the blank spaces, is to address the research question. So my research question here is, are there differences in experience by type of disability? These are both categorical variables, meaning that probably the best statistic for me to pick at this point is going to be a non-parametric statistic in a chi-square analysis. So in order to do that, I'm going to go to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Crosstabs. I'm going to put the disability variable in my row. And again, it actually doesn't really matter, but this is the way I would like to read the table. And in the column, I'm going to put was this a yes or a no? Under the Statistics tab, I'm going to click chi-square, and also Cramer's V, because we've got a table that's going to be greater than 2 by 2. I'm going to hit continue. I'm going to go to cells. I'm going to make sure that the observed is checked, and then I'm going to ask for the percentages, row, column, and total. Click continue. And again, go ahead and hit paste. All right, copy that and hit run. And this is going to give us our output. So I can see we've got 34,896 people in this particular analysis. And what's happened here is I've got no's and I've got yeses. And it's broken down by ASD, student with disability, not ASD, and no disability. So, for students with ASD, 111 of them said, nope, I've never seen this happen. And 47 of them have said, within the past year, yes, I have seen that happen. So we've got a whole bunch of different percents. I'm actually more interested in the percent within. And this is where sometimes it's actually nice, because you're noticing I can't highlight over. So it's nice to bring this into a Word document and highlight. So we can see that about 70% of students with ASD are saying no. When I look down and I look at students with disabilities but not ASD, it's going to actually decrease a little bit. So that's going to be 68% said no and 31% said yeah, I've definitely seen this. When in comparison to students without disabilities, that's really where we see a difference. So students without disabilities, 19%. So a fairly less percentage here have witnessed essentially what I would call bullying behavior, okay? So there's about a 10 percentage difference between students with disabilities and students without. What we're noticing, though, is the ASD isn't really that different than the rest of students with disabilities, okay? So we're going to scroll down a little bit and we'll look at the chi-square test. So my Pearson chi-square value is right here, 2 degrees of freedom, and it is statistically significant. I want to check to make sure that none of my cells are violating the minimum cell size, and I can see none of them are less than 5. And then my effect size. So, I have a really large data set here. There's a lot of people in that. And that may lead to getting statistically significant results that maybe aren't as practically significant. So the Cramer's V is what we're going to report for an effect size. And based off of the fact that we essentially have, 3 minus 1 and 2 minus 1, the standard effect measurement for this is going to be a small effect is 0.01, a medium is 0.03, and a large is 0.05. So my effect size on this particular analysis is fairly small. But it's a meaningful way to start because we want to see, when we're looking at campus climate, people's perceptions of others and then also their perceptions of their own experiences. So thank you very much for walking through this with me. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Have a good night.